Well, the once venerable department store chain Hudsons Bay may be closing out, but the brand will survive. That's thanks to another iconic Canadian retailer. Sarah Galashan is watching the latest on this news that broke just a couple of hours ago. Sarah.
Yeah, coming out to us in the form of a press release from Canadian Tire initially, and then backed up with a press release that read very much the same from the Hudsons Bay company, both of them using the words definitive agreement, in that this is a purchase for what they're calling the iconic brands and other intellectual property of the Hudsons Bay company, which of course we know filed for creditor protection back on March 7th of this year. What we're talking about when we talk about some of that intellectual property and brands, you know, the iconic stripes that so many people have bought, those blankets, the coat of arms, that sort of thing, those things that we've seen recently, people flocking to the stores during these liquidation sales wanting to pick up what might be left in them as they have moved to these liquidation sales. But in this press release from Canadian Tire, Greg Hicks, who's the president and CEO of Canadian Tire, he's quoted extensively, and I want to read you just a little bit of what he says here about this. He writes, "This choice feels as strategic as it does patriotic. It builds on our generational connection to life in Canada, and it fits our True North strategy. The stripes will add beautifully to our portfolio of owned brands alongside other Canadian favorites that we have fostered and grown. And the Bay and its brands have long been known for their strength in categories that our customers will seek in our stores and online. It's disheartening to witness the final days of another great Canadian retailer, and while the circumstances are unfortunate, we are proud to step in for our customers." What we get from that is, while it purchased through a creditor protection, a deal that I have to note is still subject to court approval here. There is no onus on the buyer to then turn around and actually sell those brands, but the indication is from that press release that does seem to be the intention, at least online and in the Canadian Tire stores. The purchase price here in that press release, Ian, about $30 million. And also there's a line, and it's separate from the agreement that has to be court approved, but that they are looking to acquire some of the leases that Hudsons Bay has, but that would be separate from the $30 million.
Yeah, that is as intriguing as the headline in this news. We're going to talk.
I want to know which locations.
Yeah, and what are they going to do with it? We'll talk to an analyst about that in just a moment. But, you know, $30 million, a huge amount for you or me.
Yeah.
But for these two big companies, it seems like not a lot.
I mean, go back to 2006. That's when an American businessman purchased Hudsons Bay Company for $1.1 billion US. And then over the years, it was taken public. It was listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. It wasn't until 2020 that another American businessman took it private. And then, of course, 5 years later, here we are in March, and it's seeking creditor protection. And in that process, disclosing a debt of $1.1 billion. You consider that debt, then, I mean, that's where they're at. They're in the court. So again, it's court approval as to whether or not this will go through. But both sides are in agreement here. Also in the press release, I'll say that Greg Hicks writes that there have been rumors, and we have known about these rumors, that Canadian Tire might do this. And he says that based on the reaction to these rumors, it's clear that Canadians see Canadian Tire as a great home for Hudsons Bay's heritage, which brings me to our viewer question. We want to put this out to you, looking for reaction. What do you make of this deal? Should Canadian Tire be allowed to buy this iconic brand? And of course, Ian, we'll wait for those responses, and we of course have to wait for the response of the courts.
Okay, Sarah, thank you so much.
You bet.
So what plans could Canadian Tire have for the iconic Bay brand? For some insights, let's bring in retail analyst Bruce Winder in Toronto. What do you think Canadian Tire is going to do with this purchase?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ian. Yeah, I think what they're going to do is over time, they're going to develop their own product line of the four-stripe merchandise, a few other things. And they're going to have a line of products that's available in a few of their banners, maybe Canadian Tire, maybe Marks, and online, of course, CanadianTire.ca. And they're going to start to sell it and kind of get the reaction and see where it goes from there.
So knowing what you know about retail, if Canadian Tire came to you and said, look, how can we get full value from buying this brand? Let your imagination run wild. What would you recommend to them?
Well, yeah, I think over time the brand does have a lot of runway. I mean, one can envision, you know, that there could be select boutique stores around Canada and our major centers that carries a good heritage assortment of merchandise. The assortment, the brand can be, you know, have line extensions into footwear and apparel and all kinds of outdoor categories, camping, home products, backyard. You know, there's a lot of runway with this brand, and that's just the four-stripe brand. They're also, my understanding is they might be picking up the Zellers brand too. Gluckstein brand, a few things. So there's quite a bit of treasure there that can be used in the future by Canadian Tire.
And so, intriguingly, Canadian Tire has bids for a handful of the Bay's locations, their leases there. What do you think is going to happen there? Do you think there's any chance that we might see a brick and mortar version of the Bay resurrected?
No, I don't think so. Not at all. I think what they're going to do if they're bidding on leases, it's probably going to be for part of the lease, the Bay has, and they would probably look at it for a Canadian Tire store, a Sport Chek, or a Mark's. I can't see them doing anything with the Bay in its former version of itself. This is going to be reincarnated differently.
And speaking of Sport Chek and Mark's and Party City, Canadian Tire already has a handful of brands. And so how do you feel the Hudson's Bay brand fits into that portfolio?
Yeah, I think it fits in pretty well. You look at Canadian Tire, like I mentioned, that, they really stand for outdoors. They stand for heritage. They're 100 years old, so that's a good fit. Quality merchandise, Canadian merchandise, that kind of thing. So I think it fits well, like I mentioned, in outdoor categories, home categories, maybe apparel categories to start. And then you never know, there could be all kinds of opportunities I mentioned previously.
I always find Canadian Tire intriguing. I used to go there with my dad decades ago in a small store in Nova Scotia. Now they have huge stores in lots of places, including here in Vancouver, and they kind of defy an easy description, right? They're sort of a department store. You can get car tires there. You can get hockey sticks, camping supplies, furniture. It's an odd mix. It's hard to explain to Americans what Canadian Tire is all about. How would you, as a retail analyst, describe Canadian Tire and its success?
Yeah, I see it playing a differentiation strategy. I mean, they're not the lowest price, but they have good quality merchandise that's a bit more premium. They really own the automotive, home products, and sporting goods, sort of outdoor categories in Canada. They're still family owned, and family controlled, and that's a big thing too, And I think a lot of these reasons, the dealer structure, et cetera, has really allowed them to thrive despite significant competition.